building your online community. Apologies, I was just starting the recording. As a reminder, we're going to be recording the workshop today so we can post it on a resource site for folks to access in case you missed something or want to go back and review anything we cover today. So I'm going to be leading the workshop today, and my name is Megan Classic, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a second, along with Dr. David Blancha, who works with the Grad Pathways Institute at UC Davis. So David's going to be monitoring the chat box as we go through today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box, and then David will just jump in and ask questions as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Hopefully you are all now seeing my presentation. So my name is Megan Classic, and I'm a PhD candidate in geography at UC Davis, and I'm part of the Center for Environmental Policy and Behavior. My research focuses on environmental policy decision-making processes, and I'm currently studying Lake Erie harmful algal bloom policy networks. So this workshop is being conducted as part of the UC Davis Professors for the Future program, which is a competitive year-long fellowship that provides graduate students and postdocs with leadership training, classes on higher ed teaching and academic ethics, and workshops that we design, as well as workshops we meet once or twice a month to talk about navigating academia post-graduation, and sometimes outside academia as well. So each year the cohort is of about 14 to 15 students and postdocs, and so this is the cohort for this year. And you can check out the grad pathways for more information on the other workshops that have been completed or are still going to be completed as part of this program. You can also access information on previous year's workshops. So a lot of great resources there. So today's workshop is all about finding and building your online community. The first hour is going to focus on finding your community, so where to begin, how to expand, what to do next, and we'll focus on Twitter specifically as what I'm calling sort of a low-hanging fruit tool. The second hour then will feature a panel of 4 experts that are at various stages of their careers who have successfully built online communities, and so they'll be discussing how they got started and why, how they grew their communities, and then how they maintain their communities. So then the goal at the end of this workshop will be to pull together sort of a product or a document of steps or tips from the experts that then I can send out and share with you all. So as a reminder, again, we're going to be recording the webinar and posting it on a resource website, which again, I'll talk about later, so just so folks are aware. So I thank you all for joining today, and I again encourage you to submit any questions you have via the chat box, and our moderator David will get to them. The other thing at this point, hopefully folks got my email last night about registering for a Twitter account if you didn't already have one. You'll want to go ahead and log into Twitter now. There'll be a couple hands-on activities as we go if you want to participate with those. Otherwise, pending the internet holds out, I'm going to be showing some of this stuff live, and hopefully we don't have issues there. So when we talk about finding our online community, I see Twitter, as I mentioned, as sort of this baseline or low-hanging fruit tool that we can use. It's free to join. You can participate or engage as much or as little as you want with it, even if you don't actually tweet or construct brand new content, you can still benefit from what's there. And it provides a ton of support and levity on a variety of topics that we discuss as grad students and postdocs. You can find everything from mental health resources, interview tips, job postings, there are announcements about new journal articles or government reports that come out. There's discussions around work-life balance. And there are ways to share analytical tools and packages like RStats, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, as well as teaching resources. So you can get access to syllabi, readings, you can get feedback on assignments or ideas for new assignments that you might want to integrate into your own classes. The other thing that I really like about Twitter is that it keeps things in small sound bites. So 280 characters is sort of the maximum content that you can write. So for all of these reasons, as well as many others, this first portion of the workshop is really going to focus on using Twitter. In a bit, I'll talk a little bit about building a resource site that will discuss other tools and other applications. But again, for this part, we'll be focusing on Twitter. So for the next bit here, it's going to be focused on folks that are either brand new to Twitter or haven't really used it that much. So if you're a Twitter pro on here or consider yourself sort of mid-range Twitter user, that's fantastic. I ask that you go ahead and tweet at me. And so you can see my Twitter handles at the bottom of the slides, along with the hashtag #FindingOnlineCommunity. So go ahead and share with me your tips for using Twitter as a grad student or postdoc. How do you use it? What questions do you have? Hopefully you'll also be able to glean some tips or just have a refresher on some of the stuff that I'm going to be going over. So for those of you who might be new to Twitter or have no idea what I was just talking about as far as hashtags, don't worry about it. We're going to touch on that now. So again, you want to be logged into Twitter if you want to go ahead and go along with us here. Okay, so this is my homepage for Twitter. It might look different from yours. I have my settings set up to have this dark background. Yours might be white. Not a big deal. Those are settings that you can change that we won't cover today, but I'm happy to help people if they're interested in that in the future. So you've created a Twitter account. Now what? So one of the things that I think is important to start with is the profile. So on the left side is sort of your navigation toolbar. So if you click on profile, again, you need to be logged in, you'll be taken to your personalized Twitter page, right? And you'll note that it has a bunch of information about you, but it's not sort of an in-depth interview. And what you can write is actually limited, which is something that I like about it. You don't get too bogged down with too much of a bio or too much detail on someone. So that being said, I think the profile is very important because it shows people, one, that you are real, and two, what you're interested in. As you sort of delve into the digital world, you'll find that there are what are called trolls, or accounts that are set up either by a robot or paid for by someone, or just someone that's trying to have dumb fun, where people will engage with content in a sort of purpose of stoking the fire, so to speak, or to get people agitated to try to start confrontation. And so because of those reasons, I sort of suggest that you begin with updating your profile so that it can ground you and personalize you, and people will know that you are, in fact, a real person. Plus, they'll know what you're interested in. So once you're logged in and you get to your profile page, you can see again that this has down here a record of all your tweets or things that I've retweeted. I can also look at replies that I've put on tweets. Media is either pictures or videos, and then tweets that I've liked. And so we'll talk about some of those things later. But in addition, you'll see there's sort of these two pictures. You can see my Twitter handle, my name, and then a little bit of a bio about me, you know, my birthday and my website. So if we want to go ahead and edit this, we click on edit profile, right? So a lot of us are probably straightforward, but I'm going to go through it anyway. So you'll see here when you open the edit profile that you have these different boxes that you can fill out. Each has the total max of characters that you can actually use. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. Something that I like about it is it keeps it as a small soundbite still. So you can change your name. You can change it every hour if you want, every day, right? And you can also add little emojis or icons if you want. And so I do that. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I study water quality, algae. I'm a geographer. So I chose little emojis that say, hey, this is my name. These are the things I care about. So there's just little things like that that again can indicate to people what you're interested in. Then
Megan, we have a question.
Sure.
Brandy asks, any advice on a Twitter name? Should it represent your profession or just be your actual name?
That is a fantastic question. So you'll note that mine is not my name. It's rogue_Ph.D, which came about when all of the rogue accounts were being created a few years ago. you can actually change your Twitter handle. I would say if you're, I feel like I'm at this point now where I've used it so much that people are familiar in my community with what my handle is, and they can always find me by typing in my name, and it'll pop up the handle, which I'll show you in a little bit. But I would say, again, if you're looking for a professional account, probably the safest bet would be to use your name. Again, it indicates that you are a person and a real person, right? So it's completely up to you. If any of you are old enough to have used AOL Instant Messenger, I am dating myself, that's another one where you pick your username, right? And some people really regretted the usernames that they picked. So what I like about Twitter is, again, you can change it after the fact. So again, great question, but my suggestion would be if you're going professional, it probably makes sense to use your full name, just so people know who you are. That being said, if there are a lot of people that share your name, you might think about ways that you could distinguish yourself more, either by adding, like I suggested, those little icons, or adding some other underscore piece that makes you stand out. Great question. So then you can put in a bio, and so there's a lot of different ways you can use your bio. So you'll see here what I did was tag UC Davis and Johns Hopkins, two schools that I went to. I tagged EPA, and we'll talk about tagging again in a couple minutes. But you can also use the hashtags, which we'll talk about. So again, this is a way that if someone is searching for experts or somebody that knows something about harmful algal bloom governance, right? They could open my profile, see that description, and say, hey, I probably want to follow this person because I'm interested in that. So those are just some of the things you want to think about. Then, of course, you can add your location if you want, a website if you have one, and then your birth date is all optional. For the pictures, you just click on the little camera with the plus sign. The one thing I'll say on the pictures, the one that shows up in the circle, that will show up next to every tweet that you send. It'll be really small, but it'll show up along with your name. So whatever you put on this line, as well as your Twitter handle. Okay. So then there are ways to adjust your privacy settings, which I think a lot of people are sometimes concerned about with using social media or digital tools. So you can adjust, for example, who can see your tweets, who can retweet your tweets, and we'll talk about that again, as well as the look and feel of Twitter. As I noticed earlier, mentioned earlier, I have this dark background. I won't go into all the details there, but if you are interested in looking at privacy settings and look and feel, you can click on this more link, and that'll pull up a whole option panel that you can go through on ways to personalize or customize your Twitter account. Okay, so at this point, we have a profile and we have a Twitter account. That's great. So now what do we want to do? We want to begin finding people or companies or things to follow, right? We need accounts. So I think one of the best ways to do this, and you can do it from any page, there's a search bar up here in the upper right. I'll just go back to the homepage for sake of that in case folks want to start from the same landing page. So the search feature, I always use it, right? I use Google all the time when I'm trying to find something, even on a specific site, because site-specific searches often don't work. The Twitter one is actually really good. So what I would suggest, if you are one of those people that doesn't know anyone on Twitter, you don't know any handles, you can use the search feature to try to find people. Or maybe hey, I know my advisor's on Twitter, but I have no clue what their handle is. So you can use this search box. So for example, I know that my advisor, Mark LaBelle, is on here. And so when I type his name in, you'll see that this populates. So I already follow Mark. So he shows up at the top for me. So he might not show up if people are typing in Mark LaBelle, for example, on Twitter. He might not be the first one, but I can see his name, his handle, and then his picture. So at the beginning part, when you're searching for people, it might involve a little bit of sleuthing, right? Where you need to click on somebody's handle, look at their profile page, and confirm that's who you want. So if I click on Mark, for example, it takes me to his page on here, right? And so you see it looks just like mine. with some different information, a ton more followers. What can I say? He's, you know, an academic that's established. But up here where I have a following button, you'll have one that says follow if you're not already following Mark. And so following on Twitter is basically like saying, I'm interested in what this person has to say. I'd like it to show up in my main feed or on my main page of Twitter. And so when you follow someone, Twitter will notify that person that you're following them, right? And that'll show up as a notification. So see, it looks like some folks are tweeting at me probably. And that's why this number shows up on the left-hand side. So using the search tool is a great way, I think, to begin finding your community and building your network. And once you start following folks, Twitter will also give you suggestions of others. So you'll see this, you might like, and that's based on either things I tweet or like, or other people that I follow. And so the other cool thing about Twitter that I like is it's more than just people. I think that people are perhaps the most important piece where you can really connect with individuals. But there are also companies and schools and comic accounts and newspapers and journals. So for example, I teach a course on climate change, which uses the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change reports. And so I was curious, you know, does IPCC have a Twitter? So if I type it into the search, I see right away that they do. And so, you know, I can click on that and I find out that, wow, they have a ton of followers and great information. So this might be one, again, where I'd want to follow it. Another cool feature here is this little bell with a plus sign. So that's called a notification. And so this gets kind of confusing because there's a lot of different notifications on Twitter. The one on the left bar tells you anytime that someone either mentions you, tags you, or in some way interacts with one of your tweets. The bell on an account's personalized page means I want to get notifications every time this person or this account tweets. So let's say I'm teaching this course and I'm really interested for a couple months on what the IPCC has to say. Then I can use this bell and get automatically updated when they post things, which I think is also super helpful. And then you can also go back, you know, and unclick it, so it'll get rid of the notifications. So those are just some of the things that you can start to do. Similarly, journals also have Twitter accounts. So that's a great way to see some of the latest articles that have been published. So again, I really encourage you to use that search box and try to find journals that you might publish in, companies that you might interest you, as well as people, so you can start sort of connecting. One of the things that I'll say here as well is I'm talking and focusing right on like resources and the serious aspects of social media, but there are also like a lot of fun accounts on Twitter that are also great to follow if you just need a break or don't want to be serious all the time. I was telling David about one of them this morning, which I'll pull up, which is called Your Paper Sucks. And so this account is real reviewers of journal articles. And so this one I just love so much. I'm afraid this manuscript may contribute not so much towards the field's advancement as much as towards its eventual demise. So if you're ever feeling like, man, reviewer 2 is really ripping on me, this is a great account to follow just to get some levity on, okay, everyone's going through what I'm going through. So, so there's a lot of great accounts like that. Another one that's really great is called at Academics Say. And this one's always great too, right? Because it's sort of like the minutia and the red tape of what we see in academia. Again, you can see this pinned one up here. Retweets are not endorsements. They are performative engagement markers that intentionally confound direct alignment with ironic promotion, ambivalent reflection, or personal brand management so as to reveal all or nothing of one's authentic perception depending on the observer. So again, encourage you to dig in. You know, it's nice to have some of these joke accounts too to make sure, you know, we love, misery loves company, right? So definitely dig into the exploration of Twitter.
Megan, we have a question from Desiree. Can you follow a hashtag?
So the hashtags, there are different ways that you can deal with them. And I know we haven't talked about them yet. you can bookmark them, which is one of the great ways to do it, which works similarly to like an internet hashtag. So that's typically what I'll do. And then the other thing that I do a lot is use a third-party application, which I'll actually touch on in a little bit. That's very easy for following hashtags. So I'm going to put a pin in that, Desiree, if that's okay, and I'll bring it up in a little bit. Okay. So now we've talked about, different accounts that you can find. Let's talk about tweeting at people. So that's another way of also saying tagging people and things. And that's a great way to engage with the online community and build out your network, right? So usually when you use Twitter, again, you'll access it through this main page, which is why I keep coming back to it. And again, you can access it just hitting home in the upper left. And so on your homepage, this section right here is the feed, right, that I was mentioning earlier. It's similar to Facebook if you're on Facebook or Instagram. And so you can see anyone I'm following or anyone that tweets at me will show up in here. So you can see Michelle Tobias, who's one of our panelists, just tweeted at me 8 minutes ago. So when you're here, the more people you follow, the more that feed will update and you'll have new content all the time, right? So sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, but that's part of the reason why you want to think about, strategically the community or communities that you want to build or who you want to have access to. You could easily follow, every news media outlet that exists, and that could just take over your feed. So think about, what you're really interested in taking a look at. Okay, so when we want to tag someone or tweet at someone, we create a tweet. And to do that, we use this box up here at the top that's called What's Happening. So if you click in there, you can basically compose your tweet, right? So again, you have 280 characters to write. And if you want to tweet at someone or include some type of, or tag someone in it, you use the at symbol, right? Like an email address at, and then you can either start typing the handle of the Twitter user or the name. So for example, let's say I want to put, just started a workshop on finding online community. And so that's a hashtag, which we'll touch on in a second. And so teaching folks the basics of Twitter. Can't wait to have at, okay, so now I use the at sign and then whoever I want to add. So in this case, I'm going to tag one of the panelists. So I can start typing his name, which is Bernardo Bastien. And there he shows up in this drop down. So I just click it and you'll see his Twitter handle shows up. And so I'm just going to say, join our panel of experts in a bit. Okay, so before I hit tweet, so that's how you send it off into the Twitter sphere, right? I wanted to point out a couple things. First is this circle. So this blue line indicates how close you are to meeting your 280 character total or limit. So when you get past your 280 characters, your text will turn red and it will not allow you to tweet. So that's one thing to take into account. So there's some other icons under here, right? So you can add an image. You can add a GIF or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it. You can add a live poll question for folks, which is, you'll see a lot of people using that as you get more and more into Twitter, which is a great way to get immediate feedback. You can also add emojis or pictures. And then finally, the last little thing you see under here is this plus sign. And so this allows users to create what are called threads. And so a thread is sort of a series of tweets that are strung together as a complete story, right? So for example, you may want to share a story about meeting your academic role model at a conference, and 280 characters just isn't going to cut it. So you can break it into, let's say, 5 tweets that explain like, oh, meeting this person, showing up, not knowing anyone, and then starry eyes, found the role model of my life, and it was love at first sight. So what you'll do here is you can type your content of one tweet, and then you just hit the plus sign, and then you can type the content of the second tweet. And so you keep doing that until you've completed your thread, and then you hit tweet and it will publish everything together. Why this is important is because if I have this really cool story to tell and I just put one tweet and tweet it, then anyone could comment on it. And then when I add another tweet, it might show up below those comments. So this is a way of keeping it all together. So I'm going to go ahead and tweet this one. All right. So I'm going to pause here and have people do sort of a hands-on activity, right? So I want you to compose a tweet that tags my handle in it and has where you're tuning in from, what program or department you're part of, and whether you're a grad student, a postdoc, or someone else. And I'm going to put some bonus points on there for encouraging you to follow your fellow participants to begin building out your networking community, right? We have, I don't know how many people exactly we have on here right now. I know there were 64 or so signed up. So, even if we have 10 people, 20 people on here, that's a great community that you can start building of people that are all interested in expanding on their network. So I'm going to go back over here to Twitter again. And so again, as folks interact or tweet at me, you'll see this notification number pop up. And so I can click on that and I can see, right, some of the stuff that folks are writing in here. So this is great. We've got some Twitter tips for newbie grad students. Fantastic, right? Erica liked a tweet. And so you can go through and you can see Jessica Griffin followed me. Awesome. I will follow you back. So what I'm going to do after the workshop is I'll go through everything that's tweeted at me or tags me in it during the workshop, and I'll follow all of you. So again, you'll have continuous building out of your network. Okay. So now I want to talk about briefly the topics, trending topics, and hashtags. So Twitter is great because you can also find information via keywords, right? Or through the use of what are called hashtags. So a hashtag is basically putting a pound sign in front of a keyword or phrase. And so the sort of the tip for hashtags is you can't have a space between words. So it's just one smushed together phrase or word with a pound sign in front of it. So you can also, again, let's say I really want to learn about statistics in R. That's something that I use in my work. I'm always up for new tips or shortcuts. I'd like to build out my R online community so I can get help. And so in the search box, again, I can type in, for example, R stats. And so you'll see, again, this list that pops up. I see these 3 options at the top, and then I see a whole long list of users. And so I could click on users and go in and I see, oh, R for data science, that sounds pretty great. R stats, that sounds great. But for now, I'm going to use this because I see the pound sign. So that tells me there's a hashtag on R stats. So when I click on that, it basically does a search within Twitter for anything that's used that hashtag. And so you'll see this series of sort of tabs at the top. And so it starts with top. And as the name sort of implies, right, the hashtag, the tweets that show up in the top tab are things that have been interacted with the most, right? So you'll see this Tidy Tuesday. So this is something where people on Tuesdays talk about the Tidyverse. That this one has 352 likes, 43 retweets, and 10 comments. So again, that's what the top sort of means. Yesterday when I was on here, yes, this is what I was looking for. This is a great one if folks are into R and data science. So Springer has released 408 of their books for free as PDFs. And so you can access that through this URL. It'll take you through a regular internet browser. And you can download anything you want. So this is another great example of like the great resource access that you have on Twitter. Okay, so then the second tab up here is latest. And so as that name implies, this will be the latest or most recent tweets that have used the hashtag #RStats. So again, I mentioned this Tidyverse. So Tidyverse tweets have their own Twitter account. So you could follow that just by simply putting your mouse over the name and clicking follow. But again, you can, whoops, sorry, I jumped to my own thing. Again, you can go ahead and interact with each of these tweets individually, but it's a nice way to see, okay, what's the most recent thing that's been posted. Next, you can go to people. And so people will show you any account that has an association with that hashtag. So as I mentioned earlier with my profile, I have like EPA tagged in my bio. Some of these people have our stats in their bio. So those would be great resources or people that you want to add to your community if you're really interested in R programming and you really want to expand what you know. And so you can see this full list. And again, what's nice is all the follow buttons are right here. So you can follow everyone you want, or you can click on someone's profile and go into the details of who they are. One of the hot tips for those of you that do R, Hadley Wickham is on R and on Twitter, and he always has new R stats stuff, and he has a great network that people can sort of build into and take ideas from. So the other piece here is that sort of one of my hot tips, as you follow folks and sort of build out your profile, people will start following you too, right? So people love to be followed, right? It's like Facebook and friends. We'd like to have more followers, but in return, it's considered good etiquette to follow accounts back, within reason. If it's clearly, a bot or a troll, or it's someone that does stuff that's in no way, shape, or form related to what you do, then don't follow them. But often I find people find me randomly, and I look at their sort of bios and their write-ups and what they've been tweeting about, and it's like, man, I wish I would have found this person years ago. So again, make sure you're following people back too. So I find that the more people you follow, the more people that will follow you. So then the last two tabs on this hashtag search page are photos and videos. And so sort of as those names imply, they'll provide you with tweeted photos or videos that use the hashtag #RStats. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so now let's go back to the homepage again. And so I'm going to talk about trending topics. So on the right side of the Twitter account, you'll notice these United States trends is what mine says. Yours might say personalized trends, and I'll explain the difference between those two. So if it says United States trends, what it's showing you are the top hashtags or topics that are being discussed on Twitter right now throughout the United States, right? And so you can see things like it's National Nurses Day. And I was mentioning to David earlier, I was creeping on Twitter this morning, hoping that we didn't have too controversial topics to show up in the recording, which they're not too bad today, but you'll see Adele also is in here. If people didn't know, now you know. Adele lost a ton of weight, sparked an entire discussion on online community about body image. So that's interesting to dive into. And then there's this show more. So you can look at, I think it's up to 20 that'll end up showing you different topics that are being discussed or hashtags. And so you can click on any of these and it'll open that page similar to RStats, but for whatever topic you're looking at. So this is a great way to just see what people are talking about. Then my tip there is if you're ever bored and you really want to see a ton of people with widely varying opinions and levels of anger, check out the trending topics and the comment threads that are attached to them. You'll really see a lot of discussion going on in there. If your trend column over here says personalized trends, it just means that Twitter is set to show you trending topics and hashtags that are picked according to who you follow and your location. And so if you're interested in sort of going back and forth between those, you can click on this little gear. And so you can see I can check a box that's, show content in this location or trends for me. This is based on my specific location and who I follow. So I could check that and you'll see it automatically updated. So that's kind of a cool little trick to go back and forth with what's being talked about. Then the last thing I want to point out here is at the bottom, there's this who to follow. So often Twitter will use an algorithm to suggest additional folks to follow based on your content and the people that you're following. Okay, so that's topics and hashtags. And the last one that I wanted to go over, sort of getting started with Twitter, is how to engage with tweets that you see posted, assuming that you want to. So one way is to like a tweet, okay? So you see here, whoops. So that's an example. See how it just jumped down? This is a live feed. So as more tweets come in, they'll go in above the rest. But if I can find that other one, which I bet I won't be able to find now because I have a lot of tweets. There it is. So Dr. Michelle Tobias wrote in and said she's tuning in from her living room in Davis. Awesome. And she's staff in the UC Davis Data Sci. She's also going to be on our panel later today. So one way that we can engage with this is to like it. So that's the heart right here. It will send her a notification that says, hey, Megan Classic liked your tweet. That was similar to what we saw in my notifications with Erica. And so a second way is to retweet. So these two arrows in a circle, you have two options. One is retweet, which will simply resend this tweet from my account. So it'll still say Dr. Michelle Tobias with all of the language that she used, but it'll come from me. This is a way to sort of amplify tweets. The other way to do this is with a comment, which basically, I'll just show you what it looks like, allows you to add a comment and retweet the tweet. So another way to amplify. This is also a great way if you find a resource, say for example, the data science books that we looked at earlier. I might say, oh, you know, my lab mate Jessica would really benefit from seeing these, and I know she's on Twitter. I can retweet with a comment and, you know, just add her name here at Jessica. So just as an example, I'll put in, yay, can't wait for the panel to get started. And then retweet. And so depending on how many tweets, okay, so you can see mine popped up here, right? So as new tweets come in, then they'll take over. But you can see what that retweet with comment looks like. And again, you can still interact with that tweet itself. Okay, so then let's see, the other ones that you can look at are this arrow with coming out of a box sort of. So this allows you to either send via direct message, think sort of text messaging through Twitter, right? So I could send this to someone. I could copy the link to a tweet. So just copy the exact, like each of the tweets has a little URL associated with it that you don't see, but I could copy it to a tweet and talk about it. Or I could add the tweet to my bookmarks, which again, bookmarks are sort of like bookmarks on an internet web page, things that you want to save and have access to on the left-hand side. Finally, you can comment on a tweet, right? And so that's this little chat bubble. And so what this does is it adds your comment underneath the tweet that's been tweeted. So the original tweet. So again, anyone, once you add that comment, anyone can engage with it or see it. And they'll have the similar options as what we saw in the original tweet. One note there is you can change those things right in your privacy settings. So there's some folks that don't want to be retweeted. There's some folks that don't want people to comment on their tweets. You can control all of that through the more options in Twitter, which again, I'm not going to talk about today, but I'm happy to talk about with folks in the future. So there are a ton of other sort of tricks and tips for using Twitter, but that at least provides you with a brief overview of enough to get you started and hopefully curious about what you can find on Twitter, right? So that moves us into sort of expanding your community. So that first part was really the bulk of this discussion. So these next two pieces are a little bit more brief and get into some more advanced pieces. So first, imposter syndrome, right? We all know what it feels like. And I just want to reiterate that it exists in the digital world as well. You may read content that people post and think, I don't have anything interesting to say. I am not confident enough to post some bite from my research or some earth-shattering piece that needs to be taken and published in Science, right? That's totally fine. And you should find a way to be comfortable with your digital engagement. That's my number one sort of tip and recommendation to folks. There are other ways to expand your community besides just creating new content. So for example, you read articles, right? Or at least you're supposed to. So when you read an article, pull out the main takeaway or some interesting piece that you found in that article or an interesting method, right? Put it in a tweet. tag the authors of the article if they're on Twitter. They love FaceTime. People love to see that all of their hard work and their published works are being read by someone, right? So I highly recommend this. When I was studying for my qualifying exam, I was trying to read like a paper or two a day, and I used this and ended up getting a ton of followers from advanced researchers because they were so excited that I was reading and posting about their papers. So I highly recommend that. It's a great way where you don't have to create new content. You pull from what people have already done. You can also, right, ask them questions. So as a side note, you can also use the tweets to ask the community for suggestions on articles to read on certain topics. So this morning I saw an account from someone who asked the question just like this. It said, what is the best research on the globalization of supply chains and domestic climate politics? Can a girl read a quick review paper? So she wrote that question and she tagged a bunch of people that she knew were sort of in that realm, and she got like 15 responses. So it's a great way to sort of dive into the community and get feedback. People love to give you their 2 cents, right? So my next sort of tip there is conferences. If you're going to a conference and you're presenting, put your Twitter handle on your slide deck, right? One of the things that's becoming big is people live tweeting presentations, right? This is also a great place where you can use threads. So the live tweeting presentations would be, for example, here I could say, hey, in this workshop, talking about imposter syndrome and digital communities, right? So just, again, little sound bites from what you find interesting in the presentation. Maybe add a hashtag if they have one, add the person that's presenting or the organization. Again, these are all ways to build up your community without actually creating brand new content. So another option, whether or not you're presenting, is to post a note on Twitter or ask one of your connections if they'd like to meet up. So this is a great way to navigate conferences, especially if you're sort of new to them. Dr. Raul Pacheco Vega, who's going to be on the panel in the next hour, I met him through Twitter, I think maybe 4 years ago, and we started following each other, and I interacted with some of his tweets, and then we randomly met up at a geography conference that we both happened to be at 2 years ago. That's the only time I've met him in person. But that's pretty cool, right? Like you can build this community of people that even if you don't see them all the time, they're still part of your community. But it was nice because I also knew someone at the conference. So those are just, I think, some little tips that are helpful. Another tip is to put your Twitter handle or topics or hashtags that you talk about or are interested in on your conference badge. So this makes it very clear, like, here's my name, this is the stuff I know about, both for in-person conversation and for digital community. Finally, you can also create a hashtag, right? So there's a ton of hashtags that exist. And when I talk about the third-party apps, I'll show you one tool that's pretty cool that looks at like all the popular hashtags. But you can also create your own. And so, for example, for this workshop, I created the Finding Online Community. So creating it is nothing more than saying, hey, group of people, here's a hashtag. When you tweet about the content I'm talking about, put this hashtag in it. That's all that consists of. You'll notice that in mine, I use capital letters for each word. And I think that helps hashtags stand out when you're using a phrase, right? If it's all lowercase, it just looks like one smushed word. So let me turn back. All right, so we're gonna do another hands-on activity now. And so I want you to compose a tweet. Oops, sorry, covering my camera. Compose a tweet with a question you have about using online communities or a fear you have about using online communities. And go ahead and tag me in it and add the hashtag Finding Online Community. And then I'm also suggesting that you add the hashtag Academic Chatter. So the bonus points here are look for the Twitter account by Academic Chatter. You can do it using the search box. Academic Chatter is fantastic. There's also Academic Twitter. Both are great for any conversations or discussions or questions that you have about academia. It has everyone from people that are just applying to grad schools to people that are late researchers as well. So definitely check that out. Okay. Let me check my time. So I'm going to move on to Twitter phase 3, which is sort of the more advanced tools. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure I touched on is what's called lists. So you can use lists that sort of your favorite or most relevant connections have created. So lists are basically feeds of all the people tagged to a given topic. So you could have anything from tech news to Women of Water to Bob's Burgers fans, really anything. And so to find someone else's list, you go to their Twitter profile page. And so for this example, I'm going to use CapSciComm. Okay, which just looks like that. So it's the Capital Science Communications feed. Okay, so this, again, opens their personalized page, right? So then to the left of the follow button and the notification button are these 3 dots, which indicates more. And so you see a whole list of options. And so in here, you can see like, okay, I really don't want any more information from these people. I can block them or mute them if they're sending too many tweets and I don't want to see them all. But here, for right now, I'm going to focus on lists. So there's this view lists. So if I click on this, it opens this new page. The first tab is, right, the owned lists, which means these are all the lists that CapSciComm, who does, capital science communication between policymakers and scientists and different actors, all the lists that they've created. Then you can see subscribed, which is anything that they've subscribed to, which means someone else created this list. And as they add new members, those will be included in the feed that CapSciComm sees. So it updates it. And then member means that someone else has added them to their list that they've created. So I'm going to go back to owned for a second. So let's say I go through here and I'm really interested in policymakers that work with science communications. So I might click on this. Oops. Sometimes that happens and you just got to go back. So you want to be careful not to click on the handle itself. It'll take you to the page. You want to click on the name of the list. Right? Okay, so this pulled up CapSciComm-policy, which says this list is staffers and policy professionals currently engaged in science in California's capital region. I can see there are 55 current members. There are only 4 subscribers. So some of the lists have many more subscribers, some of them fewer. But here I can see this mini feed, right, of all the people that have been added as members of the policy CapSciComm list. And so to subscribe, you click the subscribe button. Once you subscribe, it'll obviously say subscribe, but you can unsubscribe by clicking it. When you subscribe, it pops over here to your lists page. So if you click on lists on the left side, these are mine. So you can see my owned, so those are ones that I've created. The ones I've subscribed to, there it is, CapSciComm policy. And so from here, I can click on any of these and it'll take me into the feed about from that particular list. So the lists are a great way to build out your network. You can start following all the people that are part of a list that you're really interested in, and then you can also see who's added you to lists. So you can see some of the things here. I've been added to this Women in Water one, PhDs, diversity in STEM, NYC geography. So there's a whole range of things that you'll start getting added to the more you tweet. So we're going to go ahead and do an online hands-on activity with this real quick. So I want you to find my lists, right? Which means go to my Twitter personalized page, use the ... and then view lists. And I want you to subscribe to the online community building list. So right now that list just has our 4 panelists in it. Following the workshop, I'm going to add all of you. And so if you haven't been following the activities, tweet, make sure you send a tweet to me that you want to be added to this list. And so this will create, again, a list of everyone that's involved. And so you can automatically follow people and see what we're all talking about. So this is another great way to expand your community. Okay, so I know we are quickly running out of time. So I just wanted to touch on the additional resources and information. For Desiree, we can talk offline. I'm happy to send you the details on how to add or how to look at tracking hashtags. I use a third-party app called Hootsuite that's really useful. But for now, I wanted to talk about additional resources and information before we turn over and take a quick break and then move on to the panel. So I've created, this is my personal website. It's just classich2o.com. You can use a capital O or a 0, both will work, /PFTF project. And so this has a little bit about PFTF. And then at the bottom, it has 2 hyperlinks, right? One is building your online community, which of course is what we're doing right now. So if we click on that, hopefully the internet's still lasting. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so here what you see is I'm beginning to build out this resource page on finding and building your online community. So the recording of this workshop will be posted here once we're done today. You can see the list of the panelists that are involved as well. So for those of you that were new to Twitter that just created an account, here's the link to the steps for that. For the lists, I know we did that pretty briefly. I've started building a tutorial for those and sort of a video explaining more. That will be linked here. And then the other piece is sort of the top 10 tips for building your Twitter community, which is based on feedback and input from a wide range of scholars at different points in their career. So check that out as well. So this is the beginning of what I have there. My goal is to add more training videos, more analyses and evaluations of how to build and expand your network. And so to that end, what I'm asking folks to do, or just asking you these questions, what do you want to see posted? What tools and apps do you think would be useful to review? What types of training do you need? What would be good for sort of the advanced version of this? And what would be the most useful resource? So this applies to both building your online community, as well as, if I go back here, easing academic workflow. So this is the companion piece to what I'm trying to do, which is looking at not just Twitter, but other apps. So I've gotten some questions about project management apps like Asana and Trello, and pros and cons of each and what to use, how to track manuscript progress. So if there are things that you as a grad student or postdoc would really find useful for me to review or to find information or content that's been done on that, I really want to build out these resources to make them useful for you all. So to that end, you can either email me, which I think everybody has my email now because I emailed you last night. It's also on this webpage too, if you click on mrclassic@ucdavis.edu, or you can always tweet at me. You can use the hashtag and just tell me what you want to see and what you're interested in. Okay, so with that, I want to be respectful of time and make sure you have time for the panelists. I hope folks found that useful and interesting. We're going to go ahead and let's just take like a 3 to 5 minute, maybe 5 minute bio break, refuel if people need water or want to stretch, and we'll get the panel up and running as soon as you come back. Thanks, folks, so far. This is great. While folks are on break, I see one question about my name. Sorry about that. It's Megan Classic. Thanks, Erica, for sending it out. Yeah, MEGHANKLASIC. Here's my home office. For folks that are still on, can see my tropical beaded curtain. I'm trying to channel the islands. So while folks are finishing up their bio breaks, I'm going to ask if each of the panelists could try unmuting yourself and just saying a few words so I can confirm that we can hear you.
Sarah McAnulty, confirming audio works.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, this is Bernie.
Hey, Bernie. Thank you.
And Michelle Tobias.
Hi, Michelle.
Raul Pacheco Vega.
Hi, Raul. Perfect. Thank you all. So we'll get started in just maybe another minute or two. All right, we'll get started in one more minute so if people can wrap up their bio breaks. All right. Welcome back, folks. Hope you got a good stretch. Whoops, keep covering my camera. Sorry about that. So welcome back to the second half of our workshop on finding and building your online community. As a reminder, we're recording today's workshop, so in case folks missed something or want to go back and jog their memories, it will all be posted online and I'll email the full list at the end of the workshop. So we're now going to be segueing into our panel. And now that you have the Twitter basics down, I thought I would quickly touch on the opportunity you have for how to use what we just learned about, right? So you can follow all of our panelists on Twitter. They're all on there. Their information and their usernames are in the flyer that was sent out. And of course, you'll see it again here. You can also tweet about the panel and use the hashtag that we've been using this morning, the Finding Your Online Community. And you can tweet at the panelists about what you find interesting or if you have questions for them too. Those are all great ways to practice what we did. And then finally, check out the panelist lists if they have them. Again, that's a great way to build out your community. So again, if you have questions as we go, throw them in the chat box and David will call out if we have clarifying questions or whatnot. And with that being said, I'm extremely excited to introduce today's panelists. So I'm going to do a quick intro for each of them, and then they're going to do a quick intro, and then we'll jump into questions. So starting off, we have Bernardo Bastien. Bernie is a PhD candidate in geography at UC Davis, and he works on the interface of climate, economy, and ecology. And he's the co-host and founder of Planeteando, a platform for climate change and environmental science communication. Next up, we have Raul Pacheco Vega. Dr. Pacheco Vega is an assistant professor in the Center for Economic Teaching and Research, or the Centro de Investigación y Docencia Económicas. I hope that pronunciation was okay, in Mexico. He is a specialist in comparative public policy and focuses on North American environmental politics, sanitation and water governance, solid waste management, New Institutional Theory, Transnational Environmental Social Movements, and Experimental Methods. He is also the founder of Scholar Sunday on Twitter, and he provides a plethora of resources and blog posts to assist grad students and researchers with writing, researching, and navigating academia. Next up, we have Sarah McAnulty. Hope I pronounced that correct, Sarah. Dr. McAnulty is the founder and executive director of Skype A Scientist, a nonprofit organization that connects scientists and teachers around the world to discuss a wide range of science-related topics. She also holds the title Research Assistant Professor at the University of Connecticut. Her research expertise focuses on immunology in cephalopods, particularly the Hawaiian bobtail squid. Whoops, I'm jumping ahead. And then finally we have Michelle Tobias. Dr. Tobias is the geospatial data specialist at the UC Davis Data Lab. She is an expert in geospatial science and proprietary and open source software. She has a Ph.D. in geography and is an organizer and leader of the weekly GIS chat Twitter community discussions. So welcome to all of our panelists. And to get us started, we're gonna have each of them briefly introduce their community and digital tools of choice. And I believe we will begin with Bernie.
Yeah, hi all. My name is Bernie. I'm from Mexico City and I'm studying the PhD in geography, as you said, Megan. And I'm leading the platform called Planeteando. This is a climate change, a critical SciComm platform in Spanish. It focuses on climate change, earth science, and environmental science. And we do, a ton of stuff. We have a podcast where we talk about like the environmental challenges in movies and how to solve them. We have a weekly video blog that you can find on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And also we have invited writers for our weekly blog post. So the main hosts are me and my wife, Raisa. But we have a really large team behind us now, like content creators, bloggers, designers, script editors, and video editors also. So it's a lot of fun. It's a kind of a side job. And yeah, that's basically, it's Planeteando. We try to just communicate in a fun way, climate change.
Fantastic, thanks Bernie. Next up, we have Dr. Pacheco Vega, and he wanted to pull up this website, so I'm gonna move over to that.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you everyone for coming to the workshop. I think that the first question is always very hard. How do you get started? How do you build your online community? So what I wanted to recommend is actually my website, because I already have a blog post on how you build community online. The way most of you may know me from my blog or my Twitter account, and I'm actually gonna post about it on Twitter in a few seconds as soon as we move on to the next panelist. I am not an academic blogger. I am a professor who blogs, and those are completely different identities. The way I view my blog is I happen to explain how I do things. I don't, for me, my blog is sort of my outlet, and my blog started getting famous and my Twitter account started getting famous because of my online community building strategy, which is the Scholar Sunday hashtag, which I founded 7.5, almost 8 years ago, in September 2012. And the idea of Scholar Sunday is, it's not a generalist hashtag, it's a hashtag that is specifically designed to promote other scholars. So you mentioned, who do you follow, or who do you recommend that is followed or should be followed on Twitter, and why? And the reason for that is because I was bored to tears of Scholar Sunday of Follow Friday as the promoting strategy for people online. So instead I decided to do one that was specific to academics, and that's Scholar Sunday. It's not supposed to be promoting work on Sundays. I've had thousands of fights with people online. It's not intended to promote people working on Sundays. It falls on Sunday because there was another hashtag predating mine on Saturday, which is, so I was looking for alliteration, and the other hashtag is Saturday School, and I did not want to step onto anybody's toes. I'm very respectful, and I expect the same respect as well. So my online strategy is basically promoting other people and engaging with other people, which I want to say this before everything else happens. If somebody promotes you, don't self-promote again, which is, it's kind of uncouth in my way, in the way I see it. I mean, if I promote you, it's for one reason, but there's a lot of people who say, yes, and thank you for highlighting my book, and here are my other 10 books. I'm like, that looks really bad in my view. So anyway, I'm also, full disclaimer, I have a very, very, very low filter, so I say what I think, and I hope that my 2020 approach is, I live my life with no holds barred. So what you're gonna hear here is the way I behave online as well.
Thank you, Dr. Pacheco Vega. It's fantastic. Next up, we have Dr. McAnulty. McAnulty, right?
Yeah, Sarah McAnulty is my name. Hi. So yeah, could we scroll down just a little bit on the webpage to see? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So hey, everybody. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I run the nonprofit Skype A Scientist, and our main mission is to connect people with science in as many ways as possible, in accessible ways, and mostly to meet people where they are. And so we have about 5,000 scientists in our program, and we primarily match scientists with classrooms, and currently during the pandemic, folks at home who are stuck at home and can't go to school. We also serve adults. We do live streams about 3 times a week, bringing in scientists who are working on super cool work, or who we know are just like killer science communicators. In addition to our classroom to scientist matching, we also do stuff for adults too. We do a trivia night every Thursday, and generally speaking, we are trying to make personal connections between scientists and everybody else. And so the bread and butter of our program, the scientist to classroom matching, is really all based on conversation, because we want people to have the chance to ask a scientist the questions that they're really interested in, and have a conversation with a scientist instead of just getting talked at by a scientist and sitting through a lecture. We think there's enough lectures already on the internet, and we want to really build those personal connections. And we think conversation is the way to do that, because then the scientist is listening to the person they're talking with just as much as the other way around. And so we serve about 10,000 groups a year, classrooms, groups at home, scout troops, library, book clubs, all sorts of stuff. And if you want to participate as a scientist, you can sign up at skypeascientist.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Skype A Scientist, and on Twitter at Skype Scientist, without the A, because Skype A Scientist was taken on Twitter. And that's pretty much all about me and our program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then finally, we'll have Dr. Tobias.
Hey everyone, I'm Michelle. The group that I'm talking about today is our hashtag GIS chat. What this is actually a weekly Twitter chat. It's fairly loosely organized. It actually happens today right after this workshop. So if you want to hop on Twitter, you can follow along. So it happens Wednesdays at noon Pacific time. And the topic is all things mapping. So it is all kinds of GIS and mapping tech, and actually low tech, anything mapping really. And so the history of this is that I didn't actually start this. I am sort of right now the de facto leader, I guess you could put it that way. Before me, this was actually started by a woman named Emily Garding, who does wildlife science with GIS back in 2014. And then after a while, she had some other priorities, and Nathan Saylor sort of took over organizing, just reminding people, getting the discussion going every Wednesday. And then when he had some other things to work on, things got quiet for a while. So I was like, hey, I miss this resource. No one's getting this started. So I just started. We always start every chat with welcome and ask people to say where they're tweeting from. So I just jumped in one day and did it, and then sort of have been the person who keeps things going for now. I'm sure when I am done with this, someone else will take over, sort of like the next Doctor Who, and we will continue on. So it's just a hashtag. It's loosely organized, but we get a lot of benefit out of it, and I've enjoyed it. And I put some pictures up. One day we needed some silliness. It was a tough week. Who knew it was going to get tougher? But so I asked people to just, for that day, hey, make a map of anything you want on a Post-it note and then post a picture of it. And so we had dozens of people grab whatever piece of paper was handy, it wasn't always Post-it notes, and just draw whatever map they wanted. And it was totally fun. So sometimes it's lighthearted, sometimes it's more technically oriented or career focused, but it's basically anything related to mapping, and I'm enjoying it. So that's why I do it. So that's GIS Chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to actually go out of presentation mode so we can see your faces a little bit better. So we're going to move on to some of the questions that we developed. Again, if other folks have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box. The first one that we were going to start with is how our focus is on and thinking about how we build our communities. So how and why did you build your online community? And we have a different person starting for each of these questions. And so I know a lot of you just talked a little bit about this. So if you have shorter answers or if you have more to say, that would be wonderful. And we'll start with Dr. Tobias here, who, as she just mentioned, is really building on sort of an existing community. So maybe how you found it or got involved with it or started reaching out on it would be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good point that it isn't something that I personally started. So you can participate in existing communities and get a lot out of that without having to really reinvent the wheel or make something new. You can become a leader within an existing community and contribute that way. And sometimes that's your best bet, honestly. I found out about GIS Chat just because I was on Twitter and I was asking questions about I was having trouble with doing some process, or I had a question about a tool. So I regularly use Twitter to help me find answers, to send out my questions to the community and see who can help me. And I also obviously help other people as well there. And somebody pointed out to me like, hey, why don't you join this Twitter chat that goes on every week? And I was like, okay. So that's how I got started with this community. And, as things have, for a while, there's a little bit of a lull with the community. Somebody needed to step up and kind of help reinvigorate that. So if you look at the hashtag today, I just tweeted out a quick little graphic that I made to remind people that this is going on. And, doing that every now and then is helpful for getting that built up. But really, I just got my start participating. And then when a need opened up, and it was something I could fill, that's what I did. So I didn't join this community thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be the person that, make sure this happens every week. I just joined it as a person who wanted to participate and find community. And I think participating is a great way to get your community built. It's sort of a pre-packaged thing you can tap into. And I think joining in what's already going on is a great way to get started. And I would definitely encourage you to do that first before you start building your own thing. See what's out there and see where the gaps are and what you're, where you sort of fit in with what's already going on, and then build something new if that's needed.
Fantastic, thank you. Other panelists, anyone have input?
Yeah, in terms of how it all started, well, in my case, it was when I started the master's, my master's. I went out of Mexico and I started the master's in the UK, and then I started to realize that I actually missed my community back home, no? So starting this project of Planeteando, like these video blogs, it was a way to share what were the things that I was living out there in a fun way, reconnecting with my own language, with my own slang. So it's like creating this online community, especially nowadays with social distancing, is a way to reconnect with some links that you might have lost because of the distance, no? So yeah, that's in my case, that's why I started. Like, I was in a classroom and I just saw like something that was so cool that I wanted just to go back and share it with whoever I bumped into with. But yeah, like the way for me to do that is, well, all my friends are back home, so let's just start making some videos, no?
Fantastic. Thank you, Bernie. Dr. Pacheco Vega?
Sure. I'd like to I have very strong opinions, and I'll apologize for that, but I do think that you should not make yourself the target of how many followers, how many readers, how many hits you have on your website. I have over 39,000 followers on Twitter. I never actually planned to have those many followers on Twitter. I don't care how many followers on Twitter I actually have, to be quite honest. I actually think that there's this stupid idea that the ratio of who you follow and who should follow you should be, you should follow fewer people than follow you. That's completely and absolutely stupid, and I don't think that has any validity, and I don't give a crap about that. I think what has made my community grow is precisely the fact that I devote my time to helping other people and to contributing to the growth of other people. And I think that's how you can do that. I mean, that's part of what GIS chat and all of these. I mean, I was on Planeteando last year when you guys invited me to University of California, Davis. So, I mean, I think the goal should be engagement. The goal should never be how many followers, how many people follow you, how many followers you have. So the way to grow your community is always be authentic, be honest. I hope that we have some time to discuss trolls, because there are negative sides to being online, and I would like to discuss them. So, but yes, I mean, there's no reason to be, afraid. I think all of these, like any other tool, can be managed.
Fantastic, thank you. And Dr. McAnulty, anything to add?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of what was just said is absolutely correct. I think focusing on engagement versus numbers is generally true. But I actually do focus on helping other people on Twitter, particularly of marginalized voices, try to get more followers. And I've made like a really concerted effort on trying to build their audience numbers, not for the sake of vanity, not for the sake of just having the numbers, but because if folks have more people listening to them, that gives them more power, in a sense, in terms of directing the conversation, in terms of reaching more people and having the opportunity to have those engaging moments. So while I think it's easy to say, oh, I don't care about my follower number, like, it's, at the end of the day, it is still really, really helpful to have a larger audience. So okay, I started on Twitter actively as a scientist in 2014, and the impact I can have on the greater conversation and the types of people I can reach, when then I had, between 200 and 1,000 followers, and now when I'm over 50,000 is like night and day. And so I check in regularly on who I'm reaching. And so the percent of folks who are not scientists or educators has really increased over the years. And so if we are using our platforms for science communication as opposed to just community building, not as though just community building is so important. It's what we're talking about. But if you're trying to break out of the bubble, having working together to boost each other up is really powerful and worth thinking about. So yeah, I'll just say that.
Great, thank you so much to all the panelists. Those are some great insights. I'm taking notes from what everyone says, and as a reminder, I'm hoping to pull together, a summary of sort of the key tips, pointers, and steps that the panelists talk about today, and I'll send it out to everybody at the end of the workshop. So our next question is sort of building on what we were just talking about. Can you sort of talk about the beginning stages of building or expanding your community? did you start with building your community, or did you start by building out your network and then sort of identified the gaps and jumped on that? And so for this, we'll start with Bernie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, in my case, I see, well, Planeteando has a very broad like support network behind every video and like blog. There are like, yeah, like a lot of persons. We are over 30 persons creating content and helping each other. So in that sense, I see them, or I see us as our own network, no? And then like a second circle of that network is other fellow creators, no? Other fellow persons that create content, even maybe different than environmental science, even like other kind of science communication, like, I don't know, like history or yeah, psychology. There are a tons of other edutubers, no? And that's sort of our inner network that we have. And I think it should go hand by hand with building your community. I think first you need to go out there, create a product, even if it is small, but something that you really want to share, something that you created just to have fun, something that is well thought also. Just put it out there, maybe a small video. That's how we started, no? Just put out there a video, and then started to reach out to other fellow creators, no? Hey, maybe this week, talk about the history of climate change, that communicate a history, right? So I think these things, in order to grow, these are like two legs that should go hand by hand. You cannot like, well, you need to grow both of them. So yeah, my advice on that side is definitely like to make a content that has your brand, in our case is climate change, but complement it, no? If you're gonna talk about the psychology of climate skeptics, then why don't reach out to a channel, to a YouTube channel in our case, that does psychology, no? So in that way, your followers or your community that you're gonna be building is gonna be like a reflection of what you are providing, no? So it's gonna be a mix of people that is interested in all kinds of sciences, but that is also interested in, but specifically in climate change, no? Or for example, now like that we started a podcast with a friend that is a movie lover. Well, then we decided that we were going to talk about the social and environmental problems of movies, right? So then our communities, we are aware that our community is going to be growing on that front, no? On people who likes movies and also is interested in a climate change, no? So in that way, yeah, everything that you create, every piece of content is gonna, at the end, your community is gonna be a reflection of that, no? So yeah, I think that's my advice. Like, grow your network, and that will grow your community as well.
Great, thanks, Bernie. Maybe we'll turn to Dr. Tobias now.
I think one of the things I think that Bernie kind of touched on, which really hits home for me, is that these things kind of, how do I say this? I'm not being very articulate. They sort of play off each other, right? So I have people who respect me and follow me on Twitter. They know that I do good geospatial science, and then that sort of feeds into the community because they see, oh, look, Michelle is, saying I should join this group, and I like the work that she does, so maybe I'll give it a try. But then it goes back and forth, right? The more people that join the community, the more followers I personally get, which isn't really my goal either. Like, I think I just crossed the 4,000 mark, which I was surprised at. But one of the things too, like I actually asked on our GIS chat hashtag, what do people want? What does the community want other people to know about us from the outside? And several people responded with, it's about giving. So when you have a community and you're participating, you need to be aware that you probably are going to end up giving more than you get in return. So you can't really think of what am I going to get out of this, because then it won't work as well. So you just need to go into it and say, I can give time, I can give my organizational tools and things like that. So it's really, to make these kinds of communities work, it really is about giving more than taking. You will get so much back, but you can't necessarily plan what those things are going to be. You just have to go with an open heart and say, this is what I can do, and see where it leads.
Great, thank you. And then maybe we'll turn to Dr. McAnulty if you have anything to add.
Yeah, sure. I think everything that's been said so far is totally right. And in addition, a lot of when I was kind of starting out and when I'm trying to build a new thing, what I do often is really focus on what I want to accomplish as a group, not necessarily as an individual. And so I've found that kind of call to actions have been pretty effective in my life. So for example, if I want to connect people with the public. When I was starting out in Skype A Scientist back in 2017, I really tried to make like an impassioned argument for why we should be doing something. And then the community, for me, came together around a mission, a goal, a task. And that's not going to be appropriate for some communities. It really depends on what you're trying to do. But a lot of my experience has really been in mobilizing folks to come together and do a thing. And so giving people a specific goal has been successful for me.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Pacheco Vega?
Okay, I'll mute myself. Okay, I don't know if I have anything to add to this question. I think the responses have been spectacular. So I'm happy to just move on to the next question.
All right, great. So the next question gets into this idea of how do you grow your community? And I know sort of all of these questions bleed together, right? But we wanted to try to tease out the sort of getting started, building, and maintaining. And so the question here is how sort of can you identify your audience and what they're interested in hearing? And maybe we can add in here just generally the idea of how you grow your community and how you deal with, as Dr. Pacheco Vega brought up earlier, trolls or naysayers or sort of the negativity that you might see as you're trying to build your community. And for this, we'll start with Dr. McAnulty.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a lot of different questions. So
Sorry.
I might start with the troll one because I had a fully formed idea ready to go for that. So there are two ways that you can get attacked online, kind of. There's, and attack might be that's the right word, but criticized online. There are people who have bad faith arguments, don't generally have the same goals as you, are a troll farm in Russia, are, just, antagonizing you for being a woman in science or what have you. Those are not worth your time. Block them, move on. Like, do your best to build your emotional armor around yourself. Like, just get rid of it. And then there are the really valid criticisms that will often come, particularly from having, once people are really listening to you, there's a lot of growth that I think needs to be done when you're earning kind of a voice in a community. And so learning about the perspectives of other people is really, really important and not something that comes super easily to humans in general. Some people are better than others. And so learning how to gracefully kind of accept criticism and then get better and support your community better by understanding people's perspectives is so important, and not something to shy away from, something to really internalize and get better about. So there's that. And then the other questions were, how do you identify what your audience wants? And when you're just getting started, I think there's kind of two ways to approach this. There's, what does my audience that I currently have, what are they interested in? Or do I have a very specific thing to share that I'd like to build my audience that's interested in the thing that I have to share? And those are very different. And so maybe you have a collection of information that you want to get out, but building your specific voice and kind of your approach to communicating that information is something that you can kind of play around with, particularly if you're new. There's a lot of ways to communicate the same stuff, and your method of communication, I think the one that's most natural to you is the one that's going to resonate the most, because it will have this like very obvious authenticity to it. And then it will attract a group that is naturally going to like kind of work with your style of communication. So I think playing around in that space when you're new is totally worth doing. Feel free to try something new. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. Just move on to the next thing and kind of see what people resonate with. And that can be a good way to build it up. Because generally speaking, I think if you have to, like, if you're not being your authentic self when communicating, people know that. And it's just better communication when you're speaking from the heart, kind of. Even if what you're speaking about is facts and not emotions. And then growing your community, one big piece of advice that I have is don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, for example, people who are just starting may have this, like, they may have their voice down. They may have the information that they have ready to go. They may have a deep, you know, kind of library of tweets or TikToks or Instagram posts or whatever ready to go. But sometimes it's really helpful to find an account that has a bigger following and aligns with your values and say, hey, I'm just getting started. I was wondering if maybe you'd be willing to give me a boost. Because Twitter is not a zero-sum game. Like, if I have X number of followers and I tell my following, hey, this person's doing really cool stuff, you should check them out. It's not as though I lose followers to that person. We're all winning when we all do well. And the more voices in science that we can have being heard, in my opinion, the better. And so generally speaking, I think people in science communication are pretty friendly. And so asking for help is something I would really recommend doing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry for the list of questions there. Let's turn to Dr. Pacheco Vega.
That's okay.
Sure. I was the one who actually brought up the issue of trolls. I've had, weirdly enough, I've had the same disagreements and also bad faith trolls. And this is really bizarre because a lot of people recommend blocking people. One of the things that becomes really complicated for me, my account is public because I use a lot of my tweets to build my blog. So I can't go private. I can't go private even if I have, you know, a huge attack, which is important. So, and there have been, you know, scientists really attacked, like people who's, you know, who have been doxxed and whose personal contact details have been leaked to the press and online. So, I mean, this is something that needs to be taken seriously. But when I've been attacked, I've just gotten to the point where I just mute people. I don't block people. And one of the reasons why I don't block them is because there's actually scholarly research on trolls. And the research that I've read on trolls actually says that, you know, if you react in a way that provides them with fodder for the next, you know, attack or the next negative interaction, then you, it becomes a lot more problematic for you to control. So I just mute people, and I mute with abandon. I've had people who disagree with me that I've muted for years, and I have no idea what they're saying. And I think one of the most important things is, and this is something that I think needs to be discussed, because I saw that people who follow me, some people who follow me with a closed account. And just so that you know, if you do that, I will never see a reply from you. So you can ask me any questions about whatever you want to ask me, and if your account is closed, I'm never going to see it. So if you want to communicate with me, you need to send me an email. And I don't think a lot of people actually realize this, because the reality is, you know, Twitter changes like there's no tomorrow. Like, the interface is so stupidly, it changes every 5 seconds. So instead of getting rid of Nazis and trolls, you know, they change the interface. So I think the best way to use Twitter and to use online spaces is to use them as you can control them. So if that control starts from having a closed account, close your account, but also realize that that means that you have no scalability. I mean, one of the people that I would recommend that people read for this particular work, we're all academics. is a paper by Dana Boyd and Nicole Ellison. It's a really old paper. It's about 2009. But it actually tells you the properties of social networking sites. And one of them is the scalability. And Dr. Tobias was mentioning this. I mean, if there's something you want to escalate, you need to come upon your community. And if you have a closed account, your community is pretty much invisible. So this is something that people need to realize and need to take into account. Also, and this is important as well, I don't know if you covered that already, but take any interaction you have on Twitter as though it's public, it's on the record, and it may be used against you as well. And I'm not saying this in a negative way, but I'm just saying this so that people realize that you should probably not say things on Twitter that you wouldn't want to tell your grandma or your grandma to see, right? So anyway, that's all what I wanted to share on this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Great advice on the don't tweet what you wouldn't share with your grandma. Okay, so let's turn to Dr. Tobias, see if you have anything to add.
I would just say on the subject of trolls, I've been on Twitter since 2012, I think. I started this at the end of my dissertation writing as a distraction that, ended up being okay, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But it took until GIS chat used to use the hashtag GIS tribe. And someone pointed out a couple years ago that they had concerns and they were like, should we really be using this term? And so the group decided, at least the people that were online that day decided, hey, let's think about a different name. And that touched off a huge debate. It was a firestorm and I was in the middle of it. And so I got a lot of negative tweets for a couple weeks while we sort of ironed some things out. And in that process, we lost some people in our community. They were adamant that they would never use the new hashtag. They still use the old hashtag. And part of that stems from people we're a global community. We have people all over the world that participate. And to some people, that term tribe doesn't have the same connotation as it does in the US. And people in the US try to explain this is a term that is specific for us to a certain group of people, and that using that is to them, at least to some people, hurtful. But that didn't happen for everyone. They didn't understand. So I got a lot of negative messages, and I would say just don't respond. I wouldn't recommend necessarily blocking them, because in my situation, I found out that means I didn't know what people were saying. I was still getting tagged by the person that I had blocked. And so people who saw it were like, how do you not know this is going on? You should know this person is saying some really hateful things. And so I actually ended up having to unblock them so I would know what sort of the threat level was. But that's only happened in that one situation. So I wouldn't be too worried about the trolls. Just, I would say if someone really has got you upset, don't respond. Just let them be, and then they'll move on to someone else. Basically, that's how I deal with those. But in terms of like growing your community and knowing what people want, sometimes you just have to keep trying. Like there's been some lulls with GIS chat where we've had some weeks where like I'm the only one there, or there's a couple people. But I would say just keep trying things until something sticks. Recently, our community has become really much more important in people's lives because people are working from home. So they're using it as a touch point. So if you just write it out, it kind of goes in waves. And right now I'm glad we've kept it up, even though it's been hard sometimes, because now it really is a good place for people to come in and touch base with people who know, what our discipline is, and we can talk sort of water cooler talk in our home offices.
Can I make one other comment about the blocking, for like the to block or not to block comment? So there's kind of like different approach, and none of this is like hard and fast rules, but one person, I think it was Christine Liu, who mentioned this to me. She said, particularly when you have a bigger following, blocking people sometimes is not just about protecting yourself. It's also about protecting the people that you retweet and you're following. Because if, for example, you have somebody that's in your community, a scientist as well as you, generally speaking, I don't block scientists who are like in the conversation with us for the exact reason that Michelle just mentioned. That's really important. But if it's someone who is not really part of our community and comes in specifically to say like hate speech and that kind of stuff, I think that it is, it's more about protecting my crew than about like me personally not wanting to tolerate hate speech. Because like you can call me awful things all day and I truly whatever, like I don't care. But if I see you saying awful things to like junior people or anybody who could be more emotionally like affected by that, like I have no tolerance for that. And so that's just something to consider when you're making these choices.
Great addition. Thank you very much. Bernie, did you have anything to add on this growing your community and or troll dealing?
Yeah, just real quick, not about trolls. I'm not our Twitter base is not large enough to have many trolls yet, but in terms of the content, really create the content that you want to see. Like that's like my main advice. Create what you would love to see out there, or the different kind of shades of you. No, for example, in Planeteando we have like different lines of content. We have lines of that are like earth science and very like sciencey stuff in terms of geoscience, atmospheric science, climate change, how it works. And that speaks to, for example, Bernie of the past, no? When I studied earth science, just like what would I like to see 7 years ago, no? Just a video about this. And also we have more things about like, well, what are things on climate justice, environmental justice, political ecology, things that I just realized until recently that are really important, no? That's another line of content of Planeteando. So, and that it's really related to what Sarah said about being authentic. If you really know, if you create the content that you would like to see, that's a nice way to be authentic. So yeah, I would go on that track in this sense.
Fantastic. Thank you all. So then we're moving on to sort of maintenance of your community, right? So you've got it going now. So this ties into content development a little bit, which I know Bernie was just touching on. How do you sort of plan your content and how far in advance do you plan it? I know some of you specifically, you know, schedule tweets or blogs. I know Dr. Pacheco Vega, I think you use this in your outreach, and maybe others of you do too. So how do you sort of decide, I guess the question is, how do you decide how often to put out new content or engage more deeply? So like for those of you that are running chats, like the GIS chat, how do you decide that once a week is what you should be doing? So for this one, we'll start with Dr. Pacheco Vega, and if those questions were not clear, let me know and I can try to
No, sure. So I have to say, in a previous life, I was a PR person. I actually managed blogger relations projects, and I blogged for a living, and I actually, had a travel and fashion advice, and a lot of very non-academic things kind of blog, and it was very popular. It was the second most popular blog in Canada, and I mentioned this because this impinged on my academic identity. A lot of people started pitching me things. You should go on this trip and write about our hotel or helicopter company and so on. And so I developed a hate for the word content. I hated the word content. To this day, I still get the hives when I hear the word content. I do write blog. I tweet whenever I decide to tweet. I pre-schedule links to my blog because I know that people read at different time zones. So I try to provide links to blog posts that I think could be useful to people when they need them. So I don't actually plan. What I do is at night, I pre-schedule 10 tweets so that people in Europe or in Japan or in Australia start reading my blog when I'm asleep. The other thing is and this is important as well, I work a lot on request. So my students, for example, say, Professor, I don't know how to do an annotated bibliography. Okay, fine. Let me show you the steps to write an annotated bibliography. Or, Professor, how do I develop a research question? Sure, give me 1 second and I'll write a blog post or a Twitter thread or whatever. So whether this is done or not, I respond to requests from students, and usually students or contingent faculty or faculty of color or students of color or queer, marginalized, etc. So I do prioritize those requests, which is the same also regarding the asking for help bit. I tend to help people who are at the margins. So students, scholars of colors, queer scholars, women, anybody who has some sort of structural disadvantage, because I know that I have a huge following. So I do prioritize those, and I prioritize those people also for blog posts and so on. People tend to tweet me, with ideas for blog posts, and I get thousands of replies. So I'm like, I have no idea who asked me for a blog post on an academic CV, but here it is. So if you are really, really keen on something that you think might benefit the larger community, send me an email, and I'll see about making the time to write it. So for people who do, so applying my lessons to people who are growing their own community, I have to say there's one particular example that I would like to highlight, and that's Gretchen Snigas. She's, I think, a postdoc at TAMU at Texas A&M. She also does water, and I think she's working with Wendy Jackson. And she asked her community, what would you need as far as a community, sort of the content you would need? So people said, I'm first generation, I have, ADHD, or I have to deal with issues of anxiety and so on. And those communities need a lot of help. So for example, a lot of people tell me, and I'm very grateful, that my steps help them with ADHD, but I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD. So I'm always scared of writing something that is not going to help the intended audience. So if you have experienced anxiety, depression, ADHD and so on, and have a diagnosis, those communities need that kind of content, and that content that can help them in conversation. If my content is useful, I'm very grateful, but I'm always afraid of damaging someone by writing something, that may trigger them, or that may put an onus on them. So for example, I used to write a lot about, 4 a.m. blogs and 4 a.m. writing, and a lot of women who had, like, a lot of academic mamas started telling me, I can't wake up at 4 a.m. because I have a child. And I was like, okay. So I started writing blog posts that were like, if you can, this is what you can do. But I would defer to always blogs written by women who are academics and who can speak more to experiences that I don't have. I'm very much gay and I'm very much Latino, but those are two characteristics that don't even color what I write about. So I don't even have anything to add to those communities. But there are communities that need that kind of content, and I think I think this is something that has been said all through the chat. Everybody, you should ask. That's all.
Great feedback. Thank you, Dr. Pacheco Vega. Dr. Tobias, do you have anything to add to these questions?
I would just say that with GIS chat, the content was sort of dictated by sort of the format that we use. So when we always start up with the same question, like, introduce yourself, tell us where you're tweeting from, then usually we wait a few minutes and let people introduce themselves, and then someone asks a question. Sometimes I'll schedule those just based on what I'm seeing as sort of trending on Twitter in the geospatial community, but sometimes it's, hey, make a map on a Post-it note. And then other people will ask things, so it's community-based, like anyone can ask a question. And then usually about 15 minutes before the end of the hour, we will have what we call our shameless plug and work in progress, where people can say, like, toot their own horn, say, oh, look, I did this thing, you should check out my blog post, or hey, I just got this grant, or I got accepted to present at this conference. And so it's the time when people are allowed to brag, and that has been really helpful to give people a space to be obnoxious if they want to, because that sometimes needs an outlet, or for the people that are really shy to step up and say, like, oh, it's okay if I brag right now. So that's really helped our communication. but that's how it came to me. That's sort of the plan, and so I've just stuck with it. It's what people expect, and it seems to work for us.
Fantastic. Dr. McAnulty, anything to add here?
I just would suggest using, like, if you don't yet use a scheduler, use a scheduler because they're life-changing. But otherwise, when you put out content is really dependent on like how much content you have to give, you know? It's like, don't be like, I have to put out a post every single day or nobody will follow me. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself. But otherwise, yeah, I like to put out like one animal picture that I personally have taken with a little something about it every weekday. So those are scheduled weeks in advance. But that's just me. That's just what works for me. So that's all I have to say there.
Fantastic. That's super helpful. I like the tip of don't pressure yourself. And then Bernie, do you have anything to add here?
No, I think this has been great advice.
Okay. I know we're about at the end of our time. We did have one more question about community engagement leading to professional development opportunities, but maybe for the sake of time, to respect folks' schedules, I'll ask the panelists, I'll follow up with you, and if you have something to share there, I can pull that together for folks as well. So I just, first of all, wanted to really thank all of the panelists. So I know we can't all clap for you, but know that I am clapping for you. That was really, really insightful and some really good information from you all that I'm sure everybody learned a lot about. So, whoops, sorry, computer's getting unwieldy. I just wanted to pull up sort of my final slide here, which is just thanking folks for participating today. Not only the panelists, but everyone that sat through and worked through the Twitter portion of the workshop as well. Great job, everybody. I think all of you, at least now, have some basic understandings of how Twitter can work. And I look forward to getting more feedback on what you want to see or what tools or what apps you want compared or what other resources I can either link to or provide to you that will help with building your online community and just easing your academic workflow more generally. So with that, I'll sort of stop and stop yapping at you. Enjoy the rest of your days.
We really enjoyed. I really enjoyed, and thank you so much to everybody for participating. I learned a lot as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really, this was wonderful. And again, I'll get the recording posted and I'll let folks know when it's up.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Megan.
Stay safe and healthy.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.